Page 3. Rabindranath had little or no formal education. At the age of 12, his father took him to the hill station Dalhousie and opened up his mind to the world of nature, astronomy, Indian music, literature, and Indian philosophy. When he was only 16, Rabindranath's first book of poems, Kabhi Kahini, A Poet's Tale, was published. When he was 16, his eldest brother, Dwijendranath, 1840 to 1926, mathematician, philosopher, and poet, brought out a literary journal called Bharati, where Rabindranath published many pieces, including essays on Dante and Petrarch, whose works he had got to know in the library of his elder brother Satyendranath, 1842 to 1923, the first Indian to join the Indian civil service. In 1878, Rabindranath travelled to England to stay with Satyendranath and his wife Gyanodanandini. During his sojourn abroad for over a year, Rabindranath was exposed to Western ways of life and to Western music and literature. Page 4. Some of the tunes and melodies that Rabindranath picked up in England were echoed in an opera, Valmiki Pratibha, which he composed in 1881. In these various ways, Rabindranath's education was somewhat unique. He always remembered that there were ways to education that lay beyond the boundaries of the school walls. When, late in his life, he wrote about his childhood and growing up years in a book called Chelevela, within bracket childhood, he remarked, quote opens, I wandered around the outskirts of schools. House tutors were appointed and I played truant. Whatever I managed to get was from the proximity to human beings. Stop unquote, footnote 1. By the time he entered his 20s, he was being recognized as a major poet in Bengali. Footnote 1, Rabindranath Tagore, Chelevela, Rabindra Rachana Boli, Volume 11, Calcutta, Government of West Bengal, 1991, page 119. Henceforth, RRWB. WB within brackets. Back to text. When he was around 22 years old, Rabindranath was asked by his father to look after the family estates. Rabindranath took this responsibility very seriously, and after a period of training in the estates offices in Calcutta, he went out into rural eastern Bengal, where he travelled by boat, as this was an area crisscrossed by rivers, the most important of which was the vast ocean-like Padma. This journey of Rabindranath into the rural world had several momentous consequences for his intellectual and creative development. Page 5. The first was that these travels brought him close to nature, a renewal and reaffirmation of the experiences that he had had as a boy at Dalhousie, when he had walked among the woods and the hills and had watched the night sky with his father. In rural and riverine Bengal, his eyes, his senses, and his mind opened up to a different facet of nature. In a letter dated June 1891, during one of his trips, he wrote, quote opens, I cannot describe the wonderful moonlit nights I am now having here. It is not my purpose to say that the address where this letter will reach does not witness moonlit nights. There over the Maidan, over the church spire, and over the silent trees, the moonlight establishes its quiet presence. ... Here I have nothing but the silent night. I won't be able to express the infinite peace and beauty I experience all by myself. ... I put my head on the window sill. The wind caresses my hair. The river gurgles on. The moonlight shimmers, and often the eyes are filled with tears. ... Footnote 2. Footnote 2. Rabindranath Tagore, Chinnopatra, RRWB, Volume 11, 1991, page 313. Back to text. The second was that from the boat and on the ground he observed the lives of the common people, the grinding poverty that dominated their lives, their daily routine. Page 6. Their rituals, their ceremonies, their festivals, and their entertainments. In another letter he wrote, quote opens, the current of life in the village is not very swift, nor is it altogether sluggish or choked up. Work and rest seem to go hand in hand. The ferry boat plying from one bank to another, the passers-by walking, umbrella in hand, along the bank of the canal, the women dipping their wicker baskets in the water to wash the rice, the peasants making for the market with bundles of jute on their heads, two men cutting up the fallen trunk of a tree with loud strokes of their axes, a carpenter, tool in hand, repairing a boat he has turned upside down in the shade of an ashwatha tree, the village dog loitering aimlessly by the side of the canal, a number of cows, their bellies full of the luxuriant monsoon grass, lying in the sun and idly flapping their ears or wriggling their tails to keep off the flies, and when the crows sitting on the ridge of their spines annoy them too much, bending their heads back to signify their objection. The few monotonous sounds of tapping and knocking that one hears here, the noises of children at play, the high wailing notes of the herdsman's song, the splash of oars, the groaning of the oil presses, page 7, are in perfect tune with the twitter of birds and the murmur of leaves. They all seem to be part of a quiet, dreamy, tender symphony, elaborate yet restrained. Footnote 3. Footnote 3, quoted in Somnath Moitra, Letters of Rabindranath Tagore, in Rabindranath Tagore 1861 to 1961, a centenary volume, New Delhi, Sahitya Akademi, 1961, page 164. Footnote 4. Rabindranath Tagore, Chinnopatra, RRWB, Volume 2, pages 346 to 47. Back to text. He discovered how the rhythm of everyday life served as the means of sustenance for the common people in spite of the exploitation and the poverty that engulfed their lives. In his mind, he could fuse together his closeness to nature and his observations of the lives of poor people. In another letter dated 10 May 1893, he expressed this coming together in a very moving way, quote opens, I see now large swollen clouds have gathered all around, ... Here the play of sunshine and clouds is so important, dash. How people stare at the sky, dot, dot, dot. I feel very sad and compassionate seeing my poor peasant subjects. They are like the Almighty's helpless children. They have nothing unless the Almighty gives it to them. When the earth's milk dries up, they only know how to cry, dash. When their hunger is assuaged, they forget everything. Stop, unquote. Footnote 4. Footnote 4 already read. This exposure to nature and the rural world found expression in a series of outstanding short stories, page 8, which were published in the mid-1890s as Kolpuguccio, within bracket collection of stories, and also in many memorable songs and poems. But there was an equally important fallout. The sufferings of human beings that he saw firsthand touched him profoundly. In an unforgettable poem written in 1894, Rabindranath wrote, quote opens, "There standing bowed head and dumb on their downcast faces, written only the story of 100 years of pain and sorrow. Greater the burden on their shoulders, they move slowly as long as they have life, dash. Then they bequeath the burden to their children, generation after generation. They do not display their anger at destiny. They do not abuse the gods. They do not blame humankind. They harbor no umbrage. For their painful lives they eke out only a few grains of rice." Stop, unquote, footnote 5. This suffering brought to him new commitment, which he expressed in a prayer-like poem published in 1901. Quote opens, "Give me the strength never to disown the poor or bend my knees before insolent might." Stop, unquote, footnote 6. Footnote 5, Rabindranath Tagore, Ebar Firao More, RRWB, Volume 2, pages 141 to 44. Footnote 6, Rabindranath Tagore, Noibeddo, Rabindra Rachanaboli, Vishwabharati, Volume 4, page 312. Henceforth, RR within bracket VB. I take the translation from Franz Bhattacharya, Rabindranath Bhakti and the Bhakti Poets in Shukanta Chaudhuri edited, The Cambridge Companion to Rabindranath Tagore, Cambridge University Press, 2020, page 388. Back to text. His commitment to the poor was lifelong. He was to write in 1916, quote opens, "Man's history is waiting in patience for the triumph of the insulted man." Stop, unquote, footnote 7, page 9. Footnote 7, Rabindranath Tagore, Stray Birds, 317. In Shishir Kumar Das edited The English Writings of Rabindranath Tagore, 3 volumes, New Delhi Sahitya Academy, 1994 to 96, Volume 1, page 434. Back to text. From the time he began touring parts of the Bengal countryside to look after his family's landed estates, he became concerned and then involved with the welfare of the people who lived in the villages. He wrote about their problems in his essays. Later on, he devoted himself to the welfare and development of villages around Shantiniketan. Rabindranath's concern and dedication to service to the poor were also reflected in his creative work, especially his short stories and in some of his novels. The experience of witnessing the lives of the poor had a profound impact on Rabindranath's view of history. In the early 20th century, he wrote that the wars and hunts of kings did not affect in any way the ways in which the lives of the rural poor were organized. He invoked the same idea with greater clarity in an essay entitled Sahitya Oitihashikata, within bracket, Historicality in Literature, written in May 1941. Towards the end of that essay, he went back to his travels in the countryside of Bengal and wrote, page 9, quote opens, "Once when I used to travel by boat along the rivers of Bengal and came to sense its playful vitality, my inner soul delighted in gathering those wonderful impressions of weal and woe in my heart, which were composed into sketches of country life month after month, ... There is no doubt that the rural scenes surveyed by the poet in those days were affected by the conflicts of political history. However, what came to be reflected in Golpoguccio was not the image of a feudal order, nor indeed any political order at all, but the history of the will and woe of human life, which, with its everyday contentment and misery, has always been there in the peasants' fields and village festivals, manifesting their simple and abiding humanity across all of history. Sometimes under Mughal rule, sometimes under British rule. I am not acquainted with at least 3/4 of that far-flung history in which the critics of today wander about so extensively. That is why I guess it upsets me so much. I have in my mind to say, single quote opens, off with your history, single quote unquote, stop, double quote unquote, footnote 8. Footnote 8, Rabindranath Tagore, Historicality in Literature, in Rudrangshu Mukharjee edited, The Best of Tagore, London, Everyman's Library, 2023, page 652. The translation is by Ranojit Guha. Back to text, page 11, continued in next file.